You bring up going back to your roots there, hitting the jujitsu mat and everything. So what was like kind of going back to the beginning here? We'll go a little out of order, I guess, from where I anticipated. So what was your pro wrestling experience before getting to WWE? Did you have much experience in the business? Like what was the story there?
Yeah. None. I came straight from college. So, yeah. So, I mean, I was a Division I All-American at Arizona State. My first 2 years in college, I was at Portland State. Then I was at Cal State Bakersfield. Both of those schools cut their wrestling programs. Bakersfield ended up bringing theirs back. But my third year, I walked on at Arizona State. So, 3 schools in 3 years, really of no fault of my own. But that was a pretty difficult time, when I went to Arizona. Drove there by myself with my stuff in my car. Didn't know anyone, had met the person I was staying with 3 times maybe. And, I knew what I wanted to do. And so I went and did it and graduated in 2013. And right after I graduated, I went to Tampa and had my tryout with WWE and got hired about a month later and started maybe 4 months after that. So, yeah, nothing really. The first time I ever stepped in a ring was at my WWE tryout.
That's cool. That's a very different path than other wrestlers, obviously. So were you scouted and recruited? Was there somebody coming out to your match?
Yeah, Gerald Briscoe.
I felt it was probably Gerald Briscoe. So did you grow up a wrestling fan? Like, what was your impression when Gerald Briscoe comes up to you and is like, "Hey, kid, I think that you'd be great for the pro wrestling business," something like that?
Well, I'm a person who does their homework essentially. So, first time he introduced himself to me, I looked him up, read about him. Didn't know about him before that because, my, I guess, wrestling knowledge was all Attitude Eras. I was born in 1990. So, I'm watching Monday Night Wars essentially, right? That's kind of the wrestling that's the time of like the most of my fandom, I would say, in pro wrestling. So, okay. But then obviously you see how successful he was at kind of transitioning and kind of other guys that, I had a bit of a relationship with Clayton Cal Jack on the Indies. He wrestled for Oregon State and we wrestled each other a few times. And then he was already with WWE. He was a year older than me. So I had spoken to him a little bit too, just to kind of see what was up and, kind of what his experience had been, those kinds of things. And so, I mean, obviously I was excited, right? I mean, I'm 22, 23-year-old kid, like, WWE's telling me, hey, like, we want you to try out. We want you to maybe come and we want to maybe pay you to learn how to wrestle for us, So, wow. Yeah, before I talked to him, I thought I was going to just be an accountant, I have an accounting degree. And I was like, truthfully, I was prepared to just, try my hand at the business world, essentially, out of college.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you obviously went a colorfully different direction instead of being an accountant then. So, like, you get down there and, like, you've got to be around some guys that have been around the independents for a while, but it's your first time in a wrestling ring. How much of it was it way different than you were expecting when you went down and did the tryouts, or was it what you were expecting kind of going into it?
Some of both, I would say. Obviously, the tryout was in Tampa. It was like one of the last tryouts that they had at the old FCW building in Tampa. So they were in the process of getting ready to move, and because I tried out in June and they started at the Performance Center, I think, in July. So like they were just getting ready to move. Man. So, the training facility wasn't too impressive. Obviously there in Tampa, it was just a few rings in a warehouse or whatever. It had kind of a grungy feel, which I actually liked because it kind of reminded me of, old wrestling rings that I grew up in, had similar smell and just kind of like, that was my first impression of it, I would say anyways. And then, getting to Orlando and kind of starting there. Yeah, it was a level of culture shock, I would say. I was just learning a lot about the business, I remember distinctly the jargon of pro wrestling, the terms and things being something I hadn't considered, but being like, whoa, this is kind of like an immediate big hurdle to have to get over, like I need to. So I started just asking guys like, hey, can you, tell me about these different terms, like I remember we were in a skull section, we were just watching, you know, film basically early on, like in my first week.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the heat, you know, the heat. I'm like, all right, dude, they've been talking about this for like 10 minutes now. I don't know what the heat means. Like, I'm just going to ask, you know, like raise my hand. Yeah, this is probably a stupid question, I know, but like, can you guys please explain to me what you mean when you say heat? Because I don't know what you're talking about, you know, and it was in the context of that portion of the match, you know, obviously where the heel takes over and whatever. And so that was, yeah, I mean, that was kind of where I started, I guess you could say, when I came in.
What was the reaction to that question? Was there laughter in the room? Was it like, what do you recall what happened after you asked that question?
Yeah, there was some laughter. There was some, you know, like I said, I mean, I prefaced it by saying, hey, I know that this is probably an obvious question or stupid, but I don't know the answer to it. So I'm going to ask it because that's just how I am. And so, yeah, there was definitely some smiles, some chuckles, but there was also, you know, some good answers. And I think I got probably, you know, a 1 to 2 minute answer kind of explaining, well, it could mean different things in different contexts, right? You know, if you have heat with the office or heat with the boys, that's the same word, but kind of different than when we're talking about shine, heat, comeback in regards to a match. So, yeah, I mean, it was, I felt like at least people were respectful of my question. They answered my question, you know, and that was my experience in NXT was pretty much great, you know, in terms of that, like all the coaching and my colleagues, and it was a pretty fantastic experience. Honestly, you know, there was a lot of positive energy in that building.
Yeah, I would imagine being a part of that first class to go into the Performance Center, you got to know that's something special walking into it. I would imagine there's some immediate camaraderie amongst that group of people when you walk in there, right?
Well, I didn't start then. I started in January, so I came in 6 months after the Performance Center started. So I wasn't actually part of the initial class, but yeah, I mean,
basically, okay.
It was definitely like what you're describing. Essentially, there was a pretty special energy about the place of like, hey, this has never been done in wrestling before. You know, they got big gym, 7 wrestling rings, you know, padded ring, like room you can cut promos in, computers you can watch them on, like all the, you know, these different things that are available to you to, you know, try to get better at your craft, essentially. Yeah, I mean, and I remember being very excited, right? I mean, here I am. Like I said, they actually called me to hire me on my 23rd birthday. I of course couldn't forget that, right? And they didn't know it was my birthday, but it just happened to be my birthday. And yeah, pretty wild, you know. And so of course I was pumped. I mean, me and my now wife, we moved across the country together. I never even been to Florida. She never been to Florida. Like, we searched for apartments online. You know, we both had cars, so we got walkie-talkies and we carpool drove across the country from Oregon to Orlando, and you know, started our adventure together. And she's been very successful as a teacher, and you know, I like to think I've had some pretty good success in wrestling, and so you know, it's been good. It's been awesome.
Yeah, Tucker, I would say you've had some success in wrestling, and we'll get to some of the highlights here in just a second. But like,